Welcome to this week's episode of Insight. During the entirety of the show, we're going to be focusing on the humanitarian crisis in Artsakh that's caused by the Aliyev regime's closure of the Lachin corridor road from Goris to Stepanakert. Let's give some background of how this started. Monday morning at around 10:30 a.m., state actors, employees of the Azeri state, whether they were from the special services or from the special forces, joined by fascist paramilitaries from the Grey Wolves organization, blocked the road that connects Stepanakert to Goris, essentially cutting off and entirely isolating the population from the rest of the world. This led to a certain level of confrontations with the Russian peacekeepers there, but they have managed to set up, there are hundreds of them there, and they have closed the road since that time until right now. Let's give a little bit of a background. This road is the responsibility of the Russian peacekeepers. It is actually technically territory that they control and no one else controls. It's not controlled by the Artsakh Republic, Armenia, or Aliyev's country. It's actually the territory controlled by the Russian state in this case, which they have obviously lost control of. This was followed by another act of inhumanitarian aggression, which was on Tuesday night, where they cut off the gas lines again, as they had done previously, essentially cutting off gas to an area that is entirely isolated from the rest of the world. Now, what is farcical is that these state agents and other fascists that showed up to close the road are claiming to be environmentalists that are concerned about mining issues in Artsakh, which is obviously absurd. And I'll show you a couple of pictures that will show how absurd this is. This is obviously farcical because the entirety of that country is actually polluted from one end to the other, from petrochemicals to oil that's dumped everywhere. So this notion that this state actors in that country are suddenly interested in environmental issues on Artsakh is idiotic on the face of it. In analyzing the situation, what are we supposed to make of this? I think what we really have here is we have the date of 2025, which was when the mandate of the Russian peacekeepers was supposed to be renewed, or they would want it ended, being pushed up to December of 2022. And what we could have here is that the regime in Baku is going for its version of the final solution, which is total control of the Republic of Artsakh and the ethnic cleansing of the Armenian population that has lived there for thousands of years, which will be the result of that control. As disastrous as this blockade has been for the people of Artsakh, and I don't want to minimize it in any way, the regime in Baku could have possibly actually handed us a gift that we could have hardly imagined on Monday morning. What they have given us is a possible opportunity to, one, break the isolation of Artsakh and to internationalize this issue, which is what it needs, what it has always needed. Going back to Monday morning, their initial arguments about their care about environmental issues was actually quite brilliant. It was probably cooked up by a Western PR firm, but it quickly fell apart once they had implemented by essentially low IQ local state actors who screwed everything up. Because to the extent that there's been any coverage of this, or there's any responses from any governments, there has not been any mention of this, and no one takes this seriously, and everyone clearly knows and actually states who is it that has closed the road to Artsakh. This point was obviously compounded by the fact that they shut the gas line, because obviously if you have concern about the environment, that has absolutely nothing to do with the gas line that's going to Stepanakert. Now let's look at the reactions from different parties around the world to this action by the Aliyev regime. The United States has made fairly strong statements calling out the regime in Baku and demanding the opening of this road and essentially making them responsible for its closure. The strongest statements, frankly, have been done by the country of France, who have made the most clear statements about who's responsible and what needs to be done. The EU, surprisingly, actually made fairly decent comments about the importance of opening up the road and all the rest of that. When we get to the weaker end of this arguments, the Russian Foreign Ministry has released statements that they're in the process of negotiating with the regime in Baku. Now, in reality, I don't understand what there is to negotiate, because you control the road. The only thing to negotiate is when they're going to leave and they're going to be able to open the door. The most disgraceful response, not surprisingly, has come from the United Nations that essentially asked both sides not to escalate, as if there is both sides in this case, which tells you a lot about the degeneracy of that organization, which we have always noted. The Armenian state from Yerevan has actually made pretty strong statements and using the correct language about how this is an attempted genocide. And the official Artsakh response that's come from State Minister Ruben Vartanyan was actually quite strong and quite heroic, and he deserves a lot of credit for that. In real terms, since Monday morning, Aliyev has actually been making a point that we have actually failed to make since November of 2020. First one is that his goal is ethnic cleansing and nothing else. And two, since that is his official position on this issue, under international law, he has lost any right to rule the people of Artsakh. Third, all negotiations for him are simply means to achieve ethnic cleansing backed up by the threat of genocide and nothing else. The fourth is that the need that this issue and the Artsakh issue needs to be taken out of the hands of the Russian state and be internationalized to have a fair solution. And given the fact that Aliyev has essentially made this a humanitarian issue, he's actually taken it out of the realm of legalities and diplomacy, which is far more dry. And when you make something around humanitarian issues, it is much easier to internationalize it. The key factor here is obviously understanding what I call the Russia factor. The primary question and the issue here is the Russian state in cooperation with the Azeri state in the actions of the last few days? Essentially, is this something that's coordinated between Aliyev and Moscow? We all know that Moscow wants to have that exclusive road through Sunik that it's going to control to sort of relieve its supply issues and transportation issues through the Lars corridor in Georgia. And what better way to achieve that and to punish the current Armenian government's Western turn and bring it to its knees by threatening essentially an ethnic cleansing of Artsakh, which they know is the ultimate blackmail against any government in this country. Now, one of the things that makes me believe that this could actually be the case, even though we will never know conclusively, is their rather strange actions, because during the last couple of days, they have never blocked protesters that are being bussed in to increase the number of these fascist thugs that are holding up the road, which they could have easily done. And given the fact of how the Russian state deals with demonstrators in its own country, it's rather funny to see their soldiers behave like they are, Swiss police officers, while at the same time blocking any access of Armenians in using these roads. So it's obvious that there's something behind this. Now, if this hypothesis is not true, that this is not being coordinated with the Russian state, what we're really seeing here is the manifestation of the Russian state, its weaknesses in this current stage, that it can actually be in a confrontation that it's losing with the regime in Baku. And if that is the case, frankly, at this point, they are not much more than a helpless, pitiful giant. Now let's move on to speculating why Aliyev chose this moment to go for his possible final solution or his current aggressions. One, it could be that given the most recent aggressions against Armenia proper brought such a reaction that he was not expecting, especially from the West. A situation like this is a low-risk and low-cost way of continuing his war of aggression and pressure against Armenia and Artsakh. Secondly, he can essentially drive home the point that unless he gets the road to Sunik, he's going to be constantly cutting off this road and not allow humanitarian access to Artsakh. Third, it could be the fact that he is unhappy with the very stated Russian position that the final status of Artsakh needs to be decided 15, 20 years from now. They want to push it down the road because obviously they want to use as many excuses as possible to stay there for as long as they can. And fourth is if he can't get immediate ethnic cleansing, which is his goal, to force the Russians, to force the Artsakh Republic to make concessions to them, given the fact that when the Russians make concessions, it's not the Russians who make concessions, it's actually, it always comes at our expense. So where does this get us to? The first thing that just shows is that the Western approach of creating peace between these two countries that involves ignoring the status of Artsakh has entirely failed, because the Artsakh issue is the 800-pound gorilla in the room. And you can't have peace without having security for the Armenian residents of Artsakh. Without that, you're not going to have peace. Secondly, I think the West needs to be open and honest about the following questions. Do they believe that the regime in Baku have the legal right to ethnically cleanse the Armenians of Artsakh? And is that something that, given their love of the sacrosanct nature of the Stalin borders, the divide and conquer borders, is that a principle, is that a hill that they're willing to die on? When we know publicly, they will never say that the regime in Baku has a right to ethnically cleanse its Armenians, even if that is their private position. And the fact that that contradiction exists allows us to put them on the spot and force them and push them to take positions and stances that they normally would not want to do. What is abundantly clear at this point is if anybody has any sense to believe that the residents of Artsakh can live under the Aliyev regime, the actions of the last few days prove that that is a fantasy. If you believe that, you're at best delusional and at worst a political imbecile. What should be our call to action at this point? Well, frankly, in the short run, it's very simple. Open the road, and if you're not going to open the road, we need to ask, push for, and demand an international airlift to the Stepanakert airport. That is a facility that already exists. It's been renovated, and it can be brought up to par. Now, the regime has actually threatened to shoot down any humanitarian flights flying in and out. And essentially, in so many words as everything else in Artsakh, it's in Russian hands. But this is something that needs to be demanded and talked about. At a minimum, it's going to put pressure and humiliate the Russians. And it is something that is going to put everyone on the spot about what needs to be done. You either do an airlift or you're going to have a Srebrenica-type humanitarian disaster. Now, many might think this is pie in the sky and unrealistic, and I would say that you're not thinking clearly if you think that. In politics, things can change on a dime. I remember in the United States, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, it was controversial to give the Ukrainian army anti-tank weapons. And now they have almost every weapon that is in the United States arsenal. So things are always changeable, and you should always be pushing for things that are beyond your reach. In conclusion, in the best of times, politics is the art of the possible. In times like this, it's the art of the impossible. It is the art of pushing boundaries and creating new realities and imposing your will on the world. It's time for us to do that. Thank you for joining me in this week's episode of Insights.
Թշնամուն թողած, իրական թշնամուն թողած ձեր մեջ, ձեր կողքին, ձեր եղբայրների, ազգակիցների մեջ դավաճաններ մի փնտրեք։ Եվ եթե համաձայն եք ինձ հետ, վաղը չէ մյուս օրը, ընդամենը վաղը չէ մյուս օրը։ Յուրաքանչյուր շրջանից Հայաստանը 36 թե քանի շրջան ունի չգիտեմ, յուրաքանչյուր քաղաքի յուրաքանչյուր շրջանից, եթե ընդամենը 10-15 տղա գա, մենք կունենանք 500 հոգանոց Այդ զորագունդը պիտի կռվի ամենավտանգավոր տեղում, որտեղ ապրել մեռնելու հավանականությունը 50%-50%-ի նկատմամբ է։ Վաղը չէ մյուս օրը, յուրաքանչյուր շրջանից 10-ից 15-ական ոչի միասին գնալու ենք կռվելու ամենաբարդ հատվածում, ու մենք հաղթելու ենք։ Որովհետև իրականում ոչինչ չի պատահել, որովհետև իրականում թշնամին նույն թշնամին է, որ ձեր առաջ փախչում էր, եւ մենք էլ նույն մենք ենք։ Ուղղակի խաթարվել է մեր հավատը մեր ուժերի նկատմամբ։ Հիմա հարկավոր է եւս մի հարված, հարկավոր է եւս մի արտնացում, այսպես ցնցում։ Եթե ցնցում մենք պիտի անենք դարձյալ հին տղաներով, որպեսզի մեր բանակը մեզանից ոչ յորվի։